Hey, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back to another Freestyle Friday session. My name is Sean, and today we have a special guest, actually my first guest for our Freestyle Friday session. So one, I want to appreciate all the comments, subscribers, and just the support that we've been able to have over this time. Likewise, the support is coming from our guest, our host today, Quinn. He's actually going to talk a little bit about his passion and understanding Abe Lincoln and some of the history behind that. But without further ado, I want to pitch it off to him. We're doing this virtually with all the COVID protocols. So, Quinn, can you hear me all right?
Yeah, I can hear you, Sean.
All right.
Awesome. Well, first off, thank you for having me. I know it's a crazy time right now with COVID and everything that's going on. Honestly, this is my first time doing something like this with YouTube. But I just volunteered overall because I think it'd be good for this channel and just something cool to talk about, especially during this time.
Hey, I
So,
appreciate it.
yeah, of course. So I guess I'm just going to talk briefly about I guess the person I'd really admired most, other than my mom and Jesus, but
There you
like
go.
an actual political figure that again I truly idolize, and I base a lot of my personality and leadership style off of, and that of course is, as Sean pointed out, is Abraham Lincoln. Um, so I guess before I'm about to ramble on for a little bit, Sean, I'm not sure if you had anything before I start.
Yeah, no. If you want to give a little background of who you are, what you do, and I guess what made you feel or become so passionate about his maybe his leadership style or
Okay.
in general, that background.
Okay, sounds good. Well, Quinn is who I am. I won't say as much about my name, but I am actually a Marine Corps officer. Um, my MOS is field artillery. It's not just shooting howitzers, actually conducting fire support for infantry, which consisted of like close air support, mortars, and of course artillery and other assets that we may use. So that's my background. I won't say much as to what I've done, but it was pretty cool.
Okay.
A good portion of that, of course, just being a Marine Corps officer in general, like whatever it may be, either you're an adjutant or even just like a logistics officer, there's leadership in some shape or form. That's the beauty about the Marine Corps. And then as we're developing ourselves as officers, they push on us from day one, since OCS is to read and, look into certain political figures or military figures or books or whatever it may be. And they always just push that on us, which is good. It's good. It's for officers and for enlisted.
Okay.
And, for myself personally, I actually did not read that much unless, while growing up, unless my, unless in college kind of like demanded me of it. And then as I became an officer, I'm like, okay, there's more responsibility and there's more that I should learn from people that are out there. And I think most people are like that as they approach it. But as you roll into reading, you just find out it's awesome about the people you learn about and what you essentially discover and encounter. But anyway, I digress. The main focus here is actually about a person who I truly admire most and most people are aware of, but not really too much about, is, of course, Abraham Lincoln.
Okay.
I guess I initially became intrigued with him because I guess I heard quite a bit and we read a bit about him while I was in college, and that's just brief. And then what really kind of got me was the film Lincoln. I'm pretty sure if you guys have seen it, but that's actually my favorite film ever. And it was a fairly accurate depiction of him, of how he was back in the day. And it's just his portrayal of him and this accurate depiction of Abraham Lincoln just really motivated me as to looking into what kind of this person this guy really was, and how did he end up being such a significant person in history. And so that kind of collided with me leaving for deployment, and along with that deployment, sometimes you get bored, and I end up reading a book about him. And this is it right here, actually, fairly thick.
All right.
And I had plenty of time to knock this out, and I learned a lot about him. But what I really pulled most from Abraham Lincoln is just his humility. So I'm just going to touch on a little bit of historical aspects and then certain things that I really derive from him that I implement on myself.
Awesome.
Yeah. So first off, well, Lincoln was born 12 February 1809. Fairly humble background. His father was a religious man, born in Kentucky, by the way, was a religious man, and then there wasn't really much about his mother. But anyway, he was not born with a silver spoon in his mouth at all. His father was fairly religious. Kentucky was a slave state, but actually his father was very much against it. And the reason for it was because of his religious views. So his
Mm.
father, yeah, his father was fairly illiterate. Um, couldn't read as much, but he knew the Bible. So that kind of really, resonated with Lincoln as he grew up. So anyway, initially throughout his time while he's growing up, again, self-made, he didn't he was not really intrigued with the labor that came with being a farmer because his father was a farmer. He didn't like it at all. People would consider him lazy when he was growing up, but actually he was not lazy at all because he didn't want to do farm work. He didn't want to do any of that. He actually was just wanted to read. He just wanted to read and write.
Mm.
And then, people would catch him in the barn or whatever, just kind of reading a book, and they thought he was just being lazy. But no, he was just trying to learn. He was really intrigued. And actually, that takes place later on, around the age of 21. He moves to, I believe, Louisville, and he's just done with, ironically, with his father because he's illiterate. He just wants to do labor. He wants to do farming, and he's just kind of done with it. And he's just like, respect to my dad, but I'm going to go educate myself. So he actually he just ends up reading on his own. He's very much a self-made individual. He had a couple of coins in his pocket, bought his own books, and it was just a guy who just taught himself. And along with that, that's probably one aspect that I admire most about him. It's just, he no silver spoon in his mouth, and he's just thought like he could do something better with himself by just self initiative.
Mm-hmm.
So that was one thing. And he kind of goes along with that. He becomes fairly active in this new town that he's in. He actually participates in local debates, and so to make long thing short, he participates in debates. He becomes effective. He runs for a local legislature. He loses, and then after that, he's like, I'm gonna look into something else, and he decides to become a lawyer. So he actually self-taught himself. He bought his own law books, and he self-taught himself law. So through his own self-teaching, he was actually able to be admitted into practicing law in that state. So by himself.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah. So again, everything that he's doing, and this is what I admire the most about this man, is that it's all on his own.
Yeah.
There's nobody around him. He left his family, so he's not doing this with his family. He's just doing this by himself. There's some friends, but they're not really close to leverage him. But he's like, you know what? I want to kind of debate. I'm good at it. Ooh, I'm gonna go run for legislature on my own. Well, then work out. I'm gonna go be a lawyer. And he just taught himself. What the
Yeah.
That's crazy.
A lot of intrinsic motivation.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's what I love. That's what I really love about him. So lawyer, whatever it may be, within that state of Illinois, and then it kind of rolls into he becomes a fairly prominent lawyer, and he joins an even a larger firm. I can't recall off the top of my head. Again, I'm just going into the details. And then he becomes a fairly prominent lawyer, and then he decides to run for Senate because he has a huge reputation in practicing law. He's actually conducted many cases in the Illinois Supreme Court, and he's well known. So he has no political background other than what he kind of did before, running a little bit in the state legislature, and then he kind of decides to run for a Senate seat, right? And then along with that, beforehand, I didn't even mention, he was also a captain of militia during the Black Hawk War. So I'm just throwing in these little details. You probably don't feel free to cut them out, but I'm trying to hit on everything. Again, it's a whole man's life. So again, senator, whatever it may be, and then throughout this time, he's dealing with certain aspects that are going with slavery, and he's actually takes on a certain individual named Stephen Douglas, who's fairly pro-slavery, and he ends up losing losing the Senate race, but actually later on, he ends up winning the presidential bid, and I'll dive into that in just a moment. So I hope I'm not just rambling on here. Am I doing okay?
No.
Yeah, because
no, I mean you're giving us a background. I would like to, kind of obviously you have your passion and you admire him,
mm-hmm.
And you're giving us those key takeaways. I would like to see if what is it that drives you, or what is it about him that is really driving you to one, wanting to learn about him, and then two, what are some of your key takeaways that maybe you've implemented even in the present time within your career or in your life that has kind of embodied a, let's say, Lincoln style of life, if that makes sense.
No, it does. And then I think everybody knows kind of like the general background. I don't want to turn this into a shorthand documentary, but yeah. So the main thing that intrigues me about Lincoln is actually there's a couple of things. One is that throughout a majority of his career, even initially, one of the strongest like motivations for himself in making decisions and pushing forward and overall initiative and making sure he was making right decisions was actually a religious aspect. He was a religious man. A majority of his decisions, were based off of actually, his conversations with God. And actually, he made a lot of battles throughout the war as well. He made it like he determined or even like declared like this battle was won. It's obviously God's divine will that I should take this certain action. So the Battle of Antietam, that was a fairly prominent one of the bloodiest wars or battles in American history. So throughout the Civil War, Lincoln was drafting up the Emancipation Proclamation. Everybody knows is the proclamation that freed the slaves during the war. And as he's drafting it, there's a lot of like backdraft from Congress, specifically the Democrats, who are like, this is wrong. It's not necessary. It's going to just create more friction with the war. And he was going to do it while he was losing the war, but it's like, no, this is not right. I need a significant victory. And Antietam came up, and he's like, okay, he declared it. If we win this war, it is God. It's God's divine decision here that I must sign this Emancipation Proclamation. So the war occurred, again, one of the most bloody wars throughout history. And once victory was declared, he decided that he was going to sign the Emancipation Proclamation.
Okay.
And so he does it with a huge amount of pressure from the southern states, which, who cares, already seceded, and from Congress, potentially losing re-election because of this Emancipation Proclamation. And he actually signs off on it. And he actually, I can't quote him exactly, but like, that is the most right thing I've ever done in my entire life, is signing on that, despite all the bickering and back and forth that's going on. He declared that. And so that's one thing, the religious aspect. And actually throughout his career, he's fairly depressed, and he deals with a lot of anxiety as well. He loses his two siblings and his mother while he's growing up. He loses all of his children except for one.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So he's been, and along with this, even throughout his administration, so he's dealing with the bloodiest war in American history. And then he's also, losing family. So this man is really taking it from all ends.
Yeah.
And again, he goes into that religious solace where, through God and through that power, like his, through assistance through him, he's able to make decisions to push through one of the most craziest times in American history. So I think that's one aspect, and I've kind of driven the point with that. The second one was his humility and turning his weaknesses into strengths. So him, like, if you were to say Lincoln, it was pointed out throughout his biography, like the weak points about him were his physical features. Right? And his there's a certain section where like people took a photograph of him, and he just came out ugly, and he was able to catch it, and he's like, oh, okay. And so what he ended up doing, it's kind of like what we're doing nowadays, is he contacted a fairly prominent photographer who, like, the one who actually caught his ugly features, and he asked him if he could take like better photos of him, like better angles and stuff. And then through that, he was actually able to advertise and like show his other features that are prominent and make him look good in pictures.
Gotcha.
So, and also in regards to his like tall stature, kind of hunchback, and his looks, he used that to his advantage, where people had like low expectations about his speeches. So, here comes this tall guy with a squeaky voice, like, okay, this is a weird dude. And then you're like, you're not expecting much. But once he's so good at speaking. Once you heard him speak, like his words were like, you're like, whoa, like you didn't even blown away. His words were already blowing you away, and you just did not expect that. And that's what helped him win the heart of the people as well. So he turned a lot of his weaknesses into strength. And then going back to the humility aspect is that, he was very much a people person. He was always down there with
Yeah.
the groups. He was socializing with everybody. He cared, and like he generally had the love of the people. That's how he won his initial election, and that's how he won the following election. Like he was such a good man, like a good president.
Okay.
And it's just that led him a long way in getting like support from Congress and from the people. And throughout this time in history, we needed a person like Lincoln. Like he was a right man at the right point of time, you know.
Mm.
And so I really like that because that's what you kind of. It's a totally different level. Nobody has their own civil war that they're
Yep.
dealing with, but like you yourself need to be the right woman or right man in the like point of history that you're in. You know what I mean? Or whatever.
Okay. Yeah.
And so that's one. Those are a few things that I kind of like get from Lincoln. He was just, and he was right there. One another thing too. I'm sorry. It's interesting, but when making decisions too, obviously he incorporated God. He incorporated like his self humility. But one thing he did as well, he researched both sides. He was never fully left. He was never fully right.
Okay.
He would read Confederate papers all the time, Confederate articles, Confederate books, and he would read them all the time. The man was a constant reader. And so he'd read that, and then he would go and read Northern articles,
Yeah.
and like he would get both sides and try to understand both perspectives before making a decision. And
Yeah.
despite him dealing with the most bloodiest war in history, the man was definitely the most kindest. Obviously, he didn't want to be brutal or aggressive towards the South, which
Okay.
he really should have. But he was caring. He didn't. There's one quote was like, "Charity was malice towards none and charity towards all." And that regard led to a nice assimilation of the South back into the Union. And that actually had some drawback because he was too kind in a way, and that actually that was an overflow of negativity throughout American history because of his kindness.
Yeah.
So that's one thing you kind of have to think about because he is so kind to the South. Where he won the war. There's Sherman's March. Ulysses Grant got lead to surrender, and they overall won the war. But once they did, Lincoln's like, we're not going to take their slaves are free, but we're not going to punish them. We're not going to take their land. We're not going to tax them. Like, no, just let them go back home to their families, and just relax, and we're brothers, and we'll get back into it.
Yeah.
It kind of led into some negative outfall. Because of that, the South was kind of able to produce their own history and still deal with African Americans in their own way.
Mm-hmm.
So and he was going to overlook the reconstruction of the nation he saved, but he wasn't able to. And a lot of historians say like if he didn't die, like we probably wouldn't have to deal with at least 100 years later for African Americans to have the right to So his kindness, honestly, I think if he would have stayed, his kindness would have actually led to positive reconstruction of the United States. But since he died, that was just chopped off, and that progression was not expected. Quality, but that's what happens. It's a gamble. That's another lesson. It's a gamble with kindness. It's a gamble with kindness. You got to think about it. But he died, and his kindness allowed the South to just be creative with what they can do within their right.
Hey, real quick, fast forwarding a little bit, if you want to, I mean, it might be a loaded question, but how do you feel his leadership style would favor in today's society?
I think fairly well. I think Lincoln, I think everybody would want a Lincoln as an officer or a superior. I think everybody. The man was humility. He was down to earth. The men were doing something, or there's something going. Like he would go down and help them out. He loved to tell jokes. He was just always joking. Actually, politicians in Congress would always get annoyed. Like, here comes Lincoln telling another joke. Like the guys around him would laugh. They're like, oh yeah, Lincoln has a joke.
Yeah.
And along with that, like he could be serious and kind, and then he could flip on a dime and when he needs to make a decision, And then, he incorporated God into his leadership as well. I think he had it all. I think Lincoln is a perfect leader. And I think everybody a Lincoln or somebody who goes down and helps the dudes out, generally cares about them, makes them laugh, but still can change on a dime to be the leader that they need him to be. So fast forward.
Now, I'm not a big history buff. I do enjoy history. I think we can all learn from our past and so we don't repeat, in the future. But with his rough, not like you said, not being fed with a silver spoon or being born with a silver spoon. His background alone, it doesn't seem like when he went through the ranks and became president, it's not like he was too far from that at any given time. He really held on to his roots and that understanding. Do you think that had a major factor of
definitely?
His presidency, and then his impact with what was going on at the time?
Yeah, no, I think so too. And I think that's how he won the support of the people. Like, and you'll see it too, even on smaller military levels, and even nowadays, somebody comes in and you could sense the vibe and the genuineness of the person.
Yeah,
and I think that's what people felt with Lincoln. And definitely, as he progressed through the ranks,
okay,
he is he's very humble. That's what I really admire about him. He didn't
okay.
know where he came from.
So he was a
He
president for the people.
Yeah. Oh, most definitely. I think most presidential, I guess, people president ever.
Yeah.
I think, in my opinion, I think he is literally the best president of the United States, even more so than Washington.
Okay.
Yeah, because he pushed us in the right direction. He talked about the past. He talked about what was going on in that time, and he gave the vision of the United States in the future, which is we're still kind of climbing there, but where we're at now, where all men are created equal, and we should all have an opportunity to find happiness.
Yeah.
Yeah, I honestly could go on and on about him. Like I said, I was initially rambling on, but the man's amazing.
No, I mean, he sounds, one, going through history books and going through, high school and taking my college classes and everything. I've taken a history class, but it doesn't really touch on one particular president. That really would take the individual to hone in on.
Yeah.
If you could leave my viewers or maybe 3 things that you think would be some key takeaways that, we could imply or apply today in our lives, maybe a Lincoln's approach, if you would. And you kind of already hit a few of those with, being humble and stuff like that. But if there's anything else you would like to add before we kind of wrap it up and conclude with what would be, 3 good key takeaways that we could try to include in our lives today?
Yeah. So I'll reiterate a couple and then I'll hit back again on another one. But so again, it doesn't necessarily have to be God or Jesus, but I think incorporating some sort of larger belief can assist you in guiding in your decision making. Second would be humility. Humility goes a long way, I think, in leadership. Being humble in any situation you're in and never forgetting where you come from. And even if you grew from, with a silver spoon in your mouth, try to find that humility somehow. That helps leadership.
Yeah.
And then lastly, which I think is actually incredibly important, and is knowing both perspectives, putting yourself in their shoes and being like, okay, why are they acting like this? So I can understand what they're thinking. And when you understand what they're thinking, it helps you interact with them in a more positive fashion where you could,
Yeah.
So getting both ends, like I told you, Lincoln read from both sides.
Yeah.
He wasn't just biased towards one. He's like, I'm trying to reunify the country. What does the South want? What are they thinking? So those would be 3 takeaways, I would say.
That's solid. I think that's a challenge that a lot of us face today, especially in the political realm. I mean, in the religious realm, people are, hey, you're this, I'm that. Let's leave it at that. We'll be our separate ways. But they don't even take the time and effort to learn about their views, to learn about their perspective and maybe their upbringing and why they believe in such a God or not a God, or this candidate versus that candidate. And we've really come to the point where our differences, although unique and yet could be exemplified and given to be what is cherished in each other's conversation and communication. But it's those same differences that are driving us apart. It's because we take such a, my opinion would be an extreme route to what that is. Oh, if you are not God, faith, Christian, man or woman, then I don't want anything to do with you. If you are not a Democrat, I don't want anything to do with you. You are not my friend if you are not a Republican, so on and so forth. And, I think it's those same principles that you stated, which we need to draw back from and really, one, humble ourselves, take in both considerations, both sides, because even both sides, there's more than just that story, right? There's more than just Democrat or Republican. A lot of times, America, we just sum it up to that. There's more than just God or no God. And to do what you pretty much said in the beginning, read, gain knowledge, and learn. And then I think that would increase our capacity to have a heart for those who are different than us.
Yeah. I think we definitely need a Lincoln now. I wish we could. And I think everybody should strive to be a Lincoln, if that makes sense.
Yeah. No, I could agree. I mean, from what you've shared with us today, I'd be interested to. You said there's a documentary. I'm more of a movie guy,
Honestly, yeah. If you have time, if you haven't seen, I think it's on Netflix.
Okay.
Lincoln, and it's actually won several awards. It's I love it, man. It's
okay.
One of my favorite movies ever. I'm just a huge history buff. Like,
gotcha.
I love history, and it's about 2.5 hours long, but damn, it's good.
Okay.
Even if you're not intrigued with the history, you'll enjoy the acting.
No, that's fine. I know you could probably share with us plenty of more stories or just breakdown of his life and maybe his childhood. Is there anything else that you want to just leave the audience or the viewers today with any parting words?
I think it doesn't matter where you come from or what your background is. If you have your own self-initiative and resilience and persistence, you could achieve something yourself. I mean, this man came from rags and he became the president of the United States that saved our nation. So that just says something.
Yeah.
So
awesome.
Yeah.
Well, hey, Quinn, I appreciate your time today, and obviously these unforeseen circumstances with telework and everything. But hey, thank you for supporting the channel and supporting and just sharing your story today with us and a little bit about your passion. It's always good to get to know each other. And stay tuned for our next Freestyle Friday sessions, where we'll have some more, hopefully more guest visits coming on soon. So thank you again, and let me know if you need anything on my end.
All right, thank you, Sean. I appreciate it. I'm gonna stop recording.
All right, take care.
Bye.